We'll start off, we had another homicide that happened. There was a press release that was sent out last night. I'll give you what I have. This is one of those situations where you don't have a whole lot of information, but this was Wednesday night about 11:30 p.m. There was a gunshot call in the 6000 block of West Tanager Place. We had several people call in that they heard multiple gunshots. Officers arrived and found that a trailer home had been shot. This is the same house that had been shot on Saturday, early Saturday morning. That one we talked about. In that instance on Saturday morning, it was shot 16 times. This one, I don't have an exact number, but several is the best that I can give you. The officers knocked on the door to check to make sure people inside were okay. There was a 44-year-old man that answered the door. He was fine. And then there was a woman in a back bedroom. When they went to check on her, they found that she had been shot in the torso. The life-saving measures were performed, but she died on scene. She is a 27-year-old from Sioux Falls. Her name first is Tanisha, Tanisha. Middle is Ada Lynn, Adalynn. Last is Brugier, Bruguier. That's pretty much what we have at this point in time. No suspects, no arrests have been made. We're still working to figure out obviously what happened. It seems like obviously this specific trailer home was targeted. The question of why that is targeted, we don't have answers to that. That's one of the things that we're looking at. One of the things we would ask is if anybody has surveillance cameras or has information to call police. Surveillance cameras in a crime like this would be of benefit. We believe it was a vehicle was driving past when the gunshots happened, so that's kind of I guess an operating theory we have at this point in time. That's pretty much all I have. I can answer questions.
Sam, there were additional calls to that block, that area, earlier in the day. There was assault at 3rd and Redbird, larceny on 400 block North Valley View, North Ren Place, drugs, such as assault on Redbird. Obviously there was that shooting the other day. What's going on in that block?
I don't know about all those specific ones you mentioned. I will say that trailer park, we've had times when there's heavy call volumes happen for various reasons. I don't know, I wouldn't think that any of these are linked. Obviously without having reviewed those reports, I don't know that stuff, but it could just be a coincidence. I don't really know why that call volume is such in that area.
There's also on or about July 1st on West 9th, somebody just drove down just across Valley View, somebody just drove down the street firing into houses. Obviously there's the homicide at Dunham. These are all pretty close together. And right. Somebody just driving down the street firing at random houses on 9th Street is unsettling for the neighbors, to say the least. What's your message to them?
Well, I mean, it's simply if you see something, say something. That's probably the best I can do. We don't have any, if things are linked, if things are related to each other, it's easier for us to kind of figure out. When you have a bunch of different types of crime that are all seemingly random and not tied together, it's a little harder to try to figure out why that's happening. We've seen this before in other parts of Sioux Falls when you have a high amount of crime that's taking place in a certain area. Why that happens, it could be any number of different reasons. The best thing we could do is tell people if they see unusual activity, if they see something suspicious, if they see obvious criminal activity like somebody waving a gun or firing a gun, get as much information as you can, a description of the vehicle, a license plate, description of the people involved, and call police. A lot of the time after the fact, well, detectives are investigating this, they'll end up talking to somebody in the area that says, oh yeah, I remember that, but they didn't call police. And so this is one of those times if people see criminal activity, if they see unusual behavior like that, we want them to call right away, not wait until detectives or officers track them down and say, hey, do you have any information? But it helps us in the moment to know that, you know, a black car or a white car, and if you have those specific details, the make, the model, or a license plate number, quite frequently, I mean, not quite frequently, but a lot of the times we're able to find those vehicles, find the people that are responsible for that crime. And then, you know, in doing so, we're solving that crime, but potentially stopping other crime from taking place.
And finally, Tanager Place is what, 100 yards from Hayward Elementary?
It's close,
Park,
yeah.
And there's a lot of people around there. Does the continued issues on that block, its proximity to the school, the park, the splash pad, at what point do the police give extra attention to that spot? Or at what point is the trailer park owner responsible for at some measure, what's going on in that piece of land? There's a lot of mobile homes out there.
Right.
They're not all part of the same park.
Right.
It's not to denigrate people who live in mobile homes, but this block, when you go there,
Well, I can't speak to, you know, the property owner's responsibility. That's going to be up to them to make that decision. What we've done in the past, and again, this is anywhere in Sioux Falls, but if we have a lot of crime that's taking place in one area, there will be extra enforcement. We're not necessarily going to come out and say we're going to have officers there, but the patrol officers that work that area are going to know we're having issues in this area or we're having issues in this part of town, and they're going to spend extra time there. So there's certain times when you're going to have to go to the different calls. In between those calls, you know, if we're looking at a specific time frame, they're going to spend extra time in that area. If we're talking about violent crimes, so obviously anything involving guns would qualify, our violent crimes detectives may be working that area too. And so it may be police officers in a marked vehicle, and maybe police officers, detectives in unmarked vehicles, but if there's extra crime that's happening, there's going to be extra enforcement. Like I said, most of the time it's going to happen without people knowing about it, without being told this is going to happen. But that's what police do. If there's problems in an area, we're going to work to take care of those problems and make it safe again.
2 questions on my end. Kind of on a similar note, but broader for the larger community outside of that area. We had the Dunham Park shooting. We had the string of shootings over the Labor Day weekend. We have this one now. It's not the first time shots have been fired into a house or some other related property, but there aren't any suspects. What is the department doing right now to potentially quell fears of what may seem like a rash of random or potentially connected or unclear shootings?
Yeah, and I mean, that's the real challenge when we're talking about random crime. Obviously, the one thing that's similar is all these recent gunshot calls, shootings, whatever has taken place. One of the things we have to do first is figure out if they're related. Then in the process, we're also trying to figure out who's responsible. The big question of why, I mean, we don't always have that, you know, and again, that goes back to the message, if you see something, say something. There's times when we've had reports of things that start off as road rage and somebody flashes a gun or points a gun. We've had gunshots that happen from that. We don't get a lot of calls about that. We get calls from the victims, but there's other people on the road. There's people in neighborhoods. There's people that see things all the time. And for whatever reason, they don't always call and report that to police. So if we can prevent these things, if we can get reports of this stuff happening, if people showing guns, people firing guns, then that makes our job easier, and obviously it makes the community safer because we're able to get those people, hold them accountable, and then hopefully we eliminate that from happening in the future.
This homicide happened Wednesday, but the release itself was not sent out until yesterday afternoon. What was the reason for the seeming delay?
Yeah, I think the big thing was waiting for that preliminary autopsy report. Initially, I think there may have been some speculation that her death was related to a drug overdose. There was some similarities between, I guess, the signs that she was exhibiting. Obviously, they provided life-saving measure, but I think they needed to confirm that. And when an autopsy is done, the coroner will be in contact with detectives and give some initial assessment. Obviously, it's not the full thing, and things could change depending on that full autopsy. And a lot of that stuff depends on getting the test results back, which sometimes can take some time. But we may have suspicions, and in this case, I think they wanted to make sure and wait until they had that information.
Is there any indicators as to who was being targeted in that house?
That's one of the questions we have, who is targeted, or specifically why that home was targeted. We don't have answers at this point in time.
So, this is the city's 7th homicide in 2024?
I believe so. I'd have to do some. I think it sounds right.
Just to be clear, the woman died from gunshot wounds.
Yes.
And how many times was she shot?
One time, I believe, is all. One time to the torso. At least that's the preliminary assessment.
And it seems a pinch ambiguous. Is it accurate to call this a drive-by shooting?
I don't know if we could call it that at this point in time, because we don't know if the shooter was in the vehicle. That's what we believe, but obviously as information comes out, things could change. So I don't know if we could consider it that, because we don't have that specifically confirmed.
You mentioned the structure being the structure that was hit 16 times last weekend. Have there been other shootings in this immediate vicinity recently, in addition to the 16
Right.
shots?
I don't know that specifically. I don't recall any shootings that have happened in that area in between the two.
These shots were fired from Fifth Street, correct?
I think,
It wasn't the front of the house.
no, it came from the north, I believe, is where the gunshots came from. And I'm not sure about the orientation of the neighborhood off the top of my head, so I think that may be accurate.
And do you know then, sorry if you already said this, how many times the residence was hit by gunfire?
Well, we know it was 16 times on Saturday. The most recent one, several, is the best that we have. I don't know that we have a specific number at this point.
Do you know what kind of weapon it
A handgun?
was? 9mm?
I don't have the caliber, but it was a handgun that was used.
Do we have varying calibers from the Saturday shooting to yesterday's or Wednesday's?
That I don't know. I believe that was a handgun as well, but I don't know the calibers on that one from Saturday.
So the female that was shot and killed, was that her residence, or was she visiting, or?
That I guess I don't know. She had been was staying there, but I don't know if this was just a visiting type of thing or if she was a permanent resident there. I don't have that information.
Neighbors say it was illegally sublet. Do you have any information on that?
No, we don't get into the leasing or subleasing.
I have to ask you this question. It happened Wednesday night. Briefing was canceled on Thursday morning.
Yesterday?
You were gone, I think.
Yeah, I was in training yesterday. No, there was briefing yesterday. We had some
You
issue.
said there was nothing on the log that was interesting. That's the,
Well, and yesterday morning, they would have still been waiting for the autopsy.
so he would have talked about
So
it.
he wouldn't have, they wouldn't have had information to know if it was an unattended death, possibly an overdose, or obviously the homicide. So timing of that, you just don't know. I mean, potentially anything could be anything until we know, but
Is it possible that this deadly shooting was a botched drug deal or related to a drug deal or
That we don't know.
precursor or following a drug deal?
yeah, that we don't know if this was related to drugs at all. There's a lot of things detectives look at, and they're looking from multiple angles. But to start with, it's talking to people, it's seeing what they know, and then kind of going from there. What the physical evidence is, where that leads us. If there were people, one person, multiple people, vehicles involved. So at this point, it's way too early to say the motive behind that or if it was related to any other type of criminal activity.
Because, I watch a lot of crime drama on TV, I know a lot about ballistics. Is there any way that you actually can figure out if there's any commonalities with the guns involved here? Whether, you know what I mean? Because you've got casings, you've probably also got slugs.
Yeah.
Or is that just fantasy?
I don't know a whole lot about that, but I would imagine, I mean, because basically what you're looking at, if the bullets themselves, once they've been fired, it's a little difficult to get one that you're able to track to match it up to the barrel of a gun, right? So there's grooves that are left in the bullet, but most of the time when the bullet hits something, there's enough damage that's done that you're not able to get a lot of information. The other part of that is the shell casings, the strike on that primer. Sometimes you're able to get information from that, but I think that's more of a comparison. That's done by the state lab, so we could send that stuff, and I'm not sure of the capability of that, but they should be able, I would imagine, be able to determine that, but that takes time, and it's nothing that's going to happen in a short amount of time. So the shell casings, there's a chance you may be able to compare them. I don't know what the extent is, if you're able to be able to say conclusively the same gun, did these was used in these different shootings, or if you have to have the actual gun to be able to compare it to make that determination or not. I don't know if that helps or not, but.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Compared it to other areas of the city, is it accurate to call this general neighborhood a high crime area?
I wouldn't necessarily think so. I mean, we've had different periods at different points around Sioux Falls, different times where you've had high amount of crime. There's any number of reasons why that could happen, and sometimes we've had areas where there's a high concentration of crime for an extended amount of time. Other times it kind of flares up, and it may be 2 months, 6 months, and then it kind of disappears. So there could be a lot of different reasons, a lot of different factors involved with that. So, yes, there's been a lot of crime in this area lately. I don't know that you would necessarily term that as a high crime area. It is in this short amount of time, but you'd have to take that long range look at that to be able to know that. And I don't know that we've had that in the past over there.
We don't know if these things are linked, but there is a commonality, and that is handguns. And apparently a lot of them. We don't know if these guns are stolen. We know that stolen guns show up. We're not going to limit handguns, but what can we do? What can we do as a community, right? Like, I don't expect the cops to be there every time somebody pulls out a handgun, but there's sure a lot of handguns getting pulled out. What can we do about this?
Well, to start with, the best thing we can do is lock up the guns that are out there. And there's a lot of times where guns are stolen. They're not necessarily, sometimes they're unlocked cars, sometimes they're locked cars, sometimes they're stolen from homes. I will say that it's pretty rare to see a report, I can't recall off the top of my head, where we've had a gun stolen from a gun safe. So people have guns, they have them in their home, but they're not locked up. If we can secure those guns, that's going to keep those guns from ending up in criminals' hands. That's first and foremost. Outside of that, part of that may be just like a societal issue, that people are more willing to use guns now than they were in the past. Maybe that's part of the availability, that more guns are stolen and they're out there. I can't really speak to that, but it used to be 15, 20 years ago, it was big news to have a shooting where somebody just shot in a neighborhood and nothing was hit. Now that seems to be a fairly regular occurrence. So something's happened. I don't know where that shift lies, but I think it begins with locking those guns up. I mean, there's Yeah, there's too many instances where criminals are ending up with guns, and the guns are coming from somewhere. Most likely, they're not going to stores and purchasing them. They're finding them through other means, which means they're being stolen.
There's this pervasive suggestion that when people see this news, whether they live in the neighborhood or in the town, a common comment to me happened yesterday several times. What's happening in this town? Has this town changed? Is it less safe than it was 15, 20 years ago?
That's a little difficult question to answer. I mean, our population has grown. We know that there's always a certain percentage of people that are committing crime. So if your population grows, that percentage is going to grow. But when we look at the percentage of like violent crime and property crime related to our population, that percentage is staying relatively even. It doesn't make people necessarily, I guess, I don't want to phrase that. You're having more of this taking place because there's more people here, but we have more people that are not involved in that too. But that percentage of violent crime per 1,000 is remaining relatively stable. I mean, we see some little ups and downs, but I mean, Sioux Falls is still a safe community. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. People, these types of, I mean, homicide is probably one of the worst crimes you can have, so that's obviously going to get a lot of attention. The shootings have been getting a lot of attention lately too. That's what people focus on. They focus on that scary, that violent crime. They may not be directly affected by it, but they know that it's happening and it's taking place, and they think that weighs into their perception that things are really bad, but the reality is things aren't that bad. We do have bad things that happen, but overall, when you look at the number of people we have in Sioux Falls and the amount of crime that we have, for the most part, people are safe, and we have a safe community. And we have things that happen, but there's bad people that commit bad crimes all over the place all the time. So I think it's all kind of relative. The bad stuff gets all the attention, but that doesn't mean that we're living in a bad place.
Can you clarify on some level with part of the autopsy whether the victim was already in an overdose stage when she was shot and then died from the gunshot wound?
Right, so that'll have to wait till the final autopsy report is done and complete. And part of that is the testing, the toxicology screens. That could take 4 to 6 weeks. It's kind of a ballpark of how long it takes for that. So the coroner, as part of that autopsy, they're going to do an evaluation of the body, but then they're also going to get those fluids and send those off for testing. So we can't speculate at this point if the victim was using any type of drugs or alcohol, because we don't know. So we'll have to wait for those to come back. The coroner will then look at that information and then make that determination about, whether that was part of the death or not.
Were there any drugs found in the home?
There was some residue, I believe, that was found in the home.
What kind of residue?
It was a controlled substance, but let me see if I can find that. That doesn't say, I'll have to do some more digging into that. Because yeah, I mean, it was controlled substance or suspected controlled substance. I don't know the amounts on that though. Or even what potential type it was. So I'll have to do some checking on that.
Thank you.
Anything else on that? Any other questions?
Any update on the Dunham Park homicide?
Nope, no update on that. Detectives are still obviously working on that. They have obviously a lot on their plate at this point, so now we have 2 homicides that are going on, but they're still making progress and still working on that.
And then on a separate topic, are you able to share anything about a missing gentleman named Tyler Weathersby? I believe Mayor Tim Hicken posted about him on social media.
There was a report that was made. It's basically a missing person report, and that was on Wednesday afternoon, so we're working to find him. I don't really have any other information to share at this point.
So in that type of an incident, since it is a gentleman, and it's not one with like dementia or something like that, does the Sioux Falls PD just do the report, or is there like involvement with them? Because also following off of the social media post and stuff, they also mentioned that they're trying to get you guys to like help them bring in dogs and search for them and stuff like that.
We don't have anything specific in this case to think that we would need to bring in dogs, and I'm not even sure where they would come from, to be honest. But any missing person case, and that could be any number of different reasons why somebody disappears. Sometimes there's medical issues, sometimes there may be mental issues, sometimes they just want to disappear. There's a lot of different reasons, but we get those reports from typically family members that say I haven't talked to them, or they left under suspicious circumstances. And so what we're doing is obviously trying to find them. So all the police officers have that information that he's missing. Detectives are working through various different channels, different sources, trying to find them. There's no crime that happened with this that we're aware of, but we're looking to find him just to make sure that he's okay. And so in other cases, we've been able to talk to people. Sometimes they just need a break. Sometimes they don't want to talk to family or friends. Sometimes there's drugs or alcohol that are involved. There's any number of different things that happen, but the focus is just finding them, making sure they're okay. And so that's what we're doing. We're working on that back end. I know the families, in all of these types of cases, families are very concerned. A lot of the time they kind of go to the worst case scenario, but we work with them. Our focus is finding this person, the missing person, making sure they're okay in whatever situation. But I don't know that we've heard about this stuff before where people want to organize a search party, but there's really no specific information about the last place that person was seen or why you want to search a certain area. We just can't organize a search party and search all of Sioux Falls because it's not practical. And so if you have specific information that a person may be in a certain area or they were, last in that area, then maybe that would be appropriate. But otherwise, it's just kind of a crapshoot. And so we do what I can on that backside of things to investigate things. If detectives learn information that a person may be in certain area, then certainly we could do something like that or be involved in something like that.
Speaking in generalization, following off of that, do you guys bring in like additional officers or delegate certain officers to the, a case like for this to be out on patrol? Or is it just kind of like a BOLO that is put out?
Yeah, well, the information is out to all officers. Outside of that, it's really a case-by-case basis. So there may be certain officers that are following up on specific things. But the idea is when all that information goes out to all the officers, they're on all the various shifts. If you just have somebody working and, pull a couple of officers and say, look for this person, that's fine during that shift when they're working. But you still have the rest of the day when potentially nobody would be looking at that. So all the information or that information goes out to all the officers, and then if there's specific need for it, we would pull resources. We would pull, an officer or two or 4 or 5, whatever it may be, to help with that particular area. But detectives would be the lead on that, and a lot of that is depending on the information that they receive. That being said, the officers that are working the street, if they learn some of that information, if somebody else comes at them and gives them information or they hear something, they're going to be in contact with the detective and share that. So there's a lot of real-time information sharing that takes place. Anything else? Okay, thanks. By the way, nothing else in the log. Get that.